What if everything you've been told about attraction is wrong? Not slightly wrong, not partially wrong, catastrophically, dangerously, humiliatingly wrong. What if the very things you've been doing, the compliments, the attention, the vulnerability, the effort, are precisely the behaviors that make you invisible, forgettable, replaceable? What if the strategies sold to you by every self-help book, every dating coach, every well-meaning friend have been systematically destroying your power with women without you even realizing it? Preste muita atenção. This is not a video about pickup lines. This is not a video about tricks. And this is certainly not a video for men who are afraid of the truth. This is a video about power, about the architecture of desire, about the dark and ancient mechanisms of attraction that no one, no university, no therapist, no influencer dares to teach you. Because once you understand this, you cannot unknow it. And the world will never look the same again. Machiavelli warned us. Centuries ago, in the cold corridors of Florentine power, this man watched how desire worked. Not romance, not love, desire, the raw, primal, animal force that makes one person magnetic to another. He watched princes command rooms. He watched weak men beg and lose everything. He wrote it all down. And then, history buried his lessons about attraction because they were too honest, too uncomfortable, too real. Today, we unbury them. But first, I need you to understand something about where you are right now. Think about the last time you were truly, deeply attracted to someone. Think about the sensation, the weight of it, the way it consumed your attention, your thoughts, your behavior. Now ask yourself, were you attracted to them because they were constantly available? Because they texted back immediately? Because they told you exactly what you meant to them in the first week? Of course not. You were attracted to them because they were a mystery, because there was something unreachable about them, because you couldn't quite figure them out, because they seemed to have a world of their own, a world that didn't orbit around you. And here's the brutal truth most men refuse to accept. What creates attraction in you is the exact same thing that creates attraction in women. The mechanisms are identical. The architecture of desire does not change based on gender. It changes based on power. And you have been trained, deliberately, systematically, to give your power away. Let me show you what I mean. You meet a woman. She's remarkable. Something about her captivates you. And immediately, your entire psychology shifts into a mode of pursuit. You become the hunter who announces himself before entering the forest. You text too soon. You compliment too freely. You reveal your cards before the game has even begun. You become, without realizing it, entirely legible. And a person who can be completely read holds no mystery. And a person who holds no mystery creates no desire. This is not your fault. You were programmed this way. Since childhood, you were told that sincerity wins hearts. That effort is rewarded. That the man who shows up, who is present, who is emotionally available, who communicates clearly, that this man is the man women want. And in the fairy tales of self-help culture, this is true. But in the actual, observable, unfiltered reality of human attraction, this is the formula for becoming a good friend who is never chosen as a lover. The world is full of men who are kind, attentive, sincere, and entirely unchosen. Machiavelli understood something that modern culture has tried to erase. Desire is not created by comfort. Desire is created by controlled uncertainty, by strategic distance, by the exquisite tension between wanting someone and not knowing if you can have them. He wrote, and I want you to hear this carefully, that the prince who relies entirely on fortune is lost when fortune changes. What he meant, applied to the dynamics of attraction, is this. The man who makes himself entirely available to a woman has placed his entire value in her hands. He has made his desirability dependent on her perception. and anything that is entirely dependent on another person's perception can be taken away in an instant. You are not a prince who begs for the approval of his subjects. You are sovereign, and it is time you began to act like it. But here is where the story gets darker. There are three specific behaviors, three specific patterns that Machiavelli studied in the context of power, influence, and the control of perception that apply with frightening precision to the dynamics of attraction. He didn't write about them as seduction tactics. He wrote about them as principles of sovereign self-mastery. And when I show you these three principles, you will recognize them immediately. Not as new information, but as something you already knew and forgot. Something your body understood before your mind was trained to override it. He warned never to use them carelessly, not because they are dangerous to others, but because they are dangerous to you. Because once you weaponize these principles, you will see attraction for exactly what it is, not a feeling, a response, a biological, psychological, inevitable response to a very specific set of stimuli. And knowing how stimuli work means you can never again claim the comfortable ignorance of believing attraction just happens. It doesn't just happen. It is created by behavior, by posture, by silence, by presence, by the precise calibration of when you speak and when you don't, when you appear and when you disappear, when you give and, more importantly, when you withhold. Machiavelli saw this in kings. He saw it in merchants. He saw it in the architecture of Florentine social power, who commanded rooms, who inspired loyalty, who created longing, and the pattern was always the same. The men who were most desired were never the men who needed to be. They were the men who seemed utterly complete without the desire of others, who moved through the world as if the world was lucky to receive their attention, whose approval, when it came, felt like a gift precisely because it was not freely given. This is not arrogance. Arrogance is performed. This is something deeper. This is the quiet, unshakable certainty of a man who knows his own value so completely that he never needs to announce it. And here's what makes this complicated. Here's what Machiavelli warned about when he said never to use these tricks carelessly. You cannot fake it. You cannot pretend to be a man of sovereign value while secretly craving validation. Women. And this is not mysticism. This is neurological reality. Women are extraordinarily sensitive detectors of inauthenticity. They can feel neediness even when it is perfectly disguised by confident behavior. They can sense the man who is performing strength versus the man who has actually built it. The performance might attract initially, but it collapses under proximity, under time, under pressure. So what Machiavelli is really teaching you, what this entire video is really about, is not how to trick women. It is how to become the kind of man who doesn't need tricks, who doesn't need to chase, who doesn't need to perform. Because the architecture of who he is, how he moves, what he has built inside himself, does the work without a single word being spoken. The three principles we are about to explore are not manipulation tactics. They are principles of self-construction, of identity architecture, of becoming, in the deepest possible sense, the kind of presence that creates desire simply by existing. But I want to be clear about one more thing before we continue. This knowledge changes you, not because it is magical, because it is real. Because once you understand why desire works the way it does, you will start to see every interaction differently. You will start to recognize the patterns in yourself and in others. You will start to notice when you are shrinking, when you are performing, when you are giving away the very thing that makes you worth wanting. And that awareness, that uncomfortable, liberating, irreversible awareness, is what Machiavelli was really warning about, not the tricks, the truth. Because the truth, once seen, cannot be unseen. He wrote, in The Prince, that it is better to be feared than loved, but that the wisest man finds a way to be both. In the context of attraction, this translates with devastating precision. It is better to be wanted from a position of scarcity than liked from a position of abundance. The man who is everywhere is needed by no one. The man who is rare is needed by everyone. You have been everywhere, for everyone, for too long. That ends today. In the next section, we go deeper. We look at the first of the three principles, the one Machiavelli called the foundation of all power. The one that, when you embody it completely, changes not just how women see you, but how every human being in your life experiences your presence. If you have ever wondered why some men walk into a room and the temperature changes, why some men speak and people lean in, why some men seem to attract without effort what others chase their entire lives, the answer begins here. Stay with me. What comes next will reorder the way you see yourself, the way you move through the world, and the way desire finds you. This is not motivation. This is architecture. Let's build. The first principle is this. Scarcity is not a strategy. It is a state of being. And there is a profound difference between a man who pretends to be rare and a man who actually is. The world can tell the difference. Women can tell the difference. And more importantly, you can tell the difference, even if you are the one doing the pretending. Machiavelli watched princes attempt to manufacture authority through performance, through elaborate ceremony, through projected confidence, through the theater of power. And he watched many of them fail. Not because the theater was bad, but because the audience could sense that it was theater. That behind the costume was an ordinary man craving the approval the costume was designed to create. The princes who truly commanded, who truly inspired loyalty, desire, and that particular quality of magnetic gravity that makes some men unforgettable, were the ones whose authority came from something real, from a life actually built, from a mind actually developed, from a purpose actually pursued. You cannot manufacture scarcity through behavior alone if you have not first manufactured it through substance. This is where most men fail. They learn to withhold texts. They learn to delay responses. They learn to appear busy. And for a moment, sometimes for a week, sometimes for a month, it works. Because the surface-level signal of scarcity creates a surface-level response of curiosity. But eventually, proximity reveals everything. And when a woman gets close enough to see that behind the performance of rarity, there is actually a man with nothing compelling happening in his life, no real passion, no real mission, no real depth, the attraction collapses instantly. Because you cannot fake a gravitational field, you can only build one. And how do you build one? That is what we are here for. That is what the next 3 sections will show you. Not as theory, but as architecture, step by step, principle by principle. The construction of a man whose scarcity is not performed, but lived. A man who doesn't chase because he is too busy building, who doesn't beg because he has too much to offer, who doesn't need to seduce because his life already does it for him. Machiavelli called this the foundation of all power. I call it the only thing that matters. Continue watching, because what comes next, the development of all 3 principles in their full depth, is where ordinary men stop and rare ones begin. If you felt that something was missing, not in your approach, but in your understanding of the game itself, you are about to find it. Let's go deeper. Machiavelli did not study love, he studied power, and in doing so, he accidentally, or perhaps deliberately, mapped the deepest mechanics of desire. Because desire and power obey the same laws. Both are responses to a very specific kind of presence. Both collapse when they are begged for. Both intensify when they are withheld. Both are created by uncertainty and destroyed by total transparency. Both require the same foundational condition, that the person who is desired, or the leader who commands, possesses something that cannot be easily taken, easily replicated, or easily understood. The three principles we are about to explore are not pickup lines. They are not techniques for a single evening. They are structural qualities, ways of being that, once built into the architecture of who you are, make attraction not something you pursue, but something that pursues you. Let us begin with the first. Principle 1. The economy of presence. Machiavelli observed something that the weak princes never understood. The men who commanded the most desire, political desire, social desire, the loyalty and longing of those around them, were the men who gave the least of themselves for free, not because they were cold, not because they were unavailable, but because they understood intuitively or by calculation that anything given in abundance loses its value. This is not philosophy, this is economics, this is the oldest law of human perception. What is rare is precious, what is common is overlooked. Air is free, diamonds are not. Not because diamonds are more useful, they are not, but because diamonds are scarce, and the scarcity of diamonds is what creates their value, not their function. Their rarity. You have been giving yourself away like air. Think about this with radical honesty. When you meet a woman who interests you, what do? You show up fully, immediately. You are available, responsive, attentive. You are, in every behavioral sense, announcing, I am here. I have been waiting. I want you to know that I am interested, that you matter, that I am ready to give you my attention whenever you reach for it. And this feels, from the inside, like strength, like sincerity, like the mature, evolved behavior of a man who is not afraid of his own emotions. But from the outside, from her perspective, it reads as something else entirely. It reads as desperation wearing the costume of confidence. Because a man who is truly living a full, passionate, purposeful life does not have unlimited bandwidth for immediate responsiveness. A man who is genuinely building something, in his career, in his art, in his fitness, in his relationships, in his mind, has a natural scarcity of time and attention, not performed, actual. When such a man gives you his time, you feel the weight of it, because you can sense, not logically, but viscerally, that his time means something, that it costs him something, and anything that costs something is more valuable than anything that is free. This is the economy of presence, not the manipulation of seeming busy, the actual construction of a life so compelling, so full, so directed toward genuine purpose that your attention becomes a natural luxury rather than a free commodity. Machiavelli would say this: the prince who grants every audience creates subjects who value none of them. The prince who is difficult to reach is the prince whose audience changes lives. The first practical application of this principle is the elimination of automatic availability. This does not mean playing games. It means asking yourself with brutal honesty the following question. Am I available to this woman because my life has no competing demands that genuinely matter to me? And if the answer is yes, if your life currently has nothing pulling your attention as powerfully as your desire for her approval, then the work is not in how you text. The work is in building a life that actually competes with her for your time. Build something, pursue something, create something, become something. Not for her, for you. Because a man who is genuinely obsessed with his own becoming, who wakes up with mission and goes to bed with progress, radiates a quality of aliveness that no strategy can replicate and no woman can ignore. And when you do turn your attention toward her, she will feel the rarity of it. She will feel that you chose her among your competing priorities. And being chosen by a man who has real choices is infinitely more intoxicating than being the only option for a man who has none. The economy of presence is not about withholding. It is about having so much happening in your inner and outer world that withholding happens naturally, as a consequence of fullness, rather than strategy. Principle 2. The architecture of mystery. The second principle goes deeper. It touches something older than strategy, something almost archetypal. Mystery is not the absence of information. Mystery is the presence of depth that cannot be fully mapped. Machiavelli wrote about this in the context of political power. He noted that the princes who maintained the most authority were the ones whose inner world remained inaccessible, who spoke selectively, who revealed their thinking only when it served them, who were never entirely predictable, whose motivations, even to their closest advisors, retained an element of the unknowable. This created, he observed, a particular quality of gravity, of presence, of being, the kind that made people lean in rather than look away, the kind that made conversations feel like privileges rather than obligations. In the context of attraction, mystery operates on the same principle with the same effect and the same cause. The woman who cannot fully decode you is the woman who cannot stop thinking about you. This is not manipulation. This is the natural mechanics of the human mind. The brain is a pattern completion machine. It is fundamentally driven to resolve uncertainty. When you encounter a person who is entirely legible, whose responses you can predict, whose reactions you can map, whose inner world is fully visible, the brain completes the pattern quickly, files it, and moves on. Interest evaporates because certainty has replaced it. But when you encounter a person who resists full pattern completion, who surprises you, who responds unexpectedly, whose inner world seems to contain rooms you haven't found yet, the brain cannot file it, cannot move on, returns to it, obsesses over it, because the pattern is not yet complete. And the need to complete it creates a gravitational pull that feels, from the inside, exactly like fascination, exactly like attraction. Most men destroy their mystery within the first 3 conversations. They tell everything, their history, their wounds, their dreams, their fears, their family dynamics, their past relationships, their current ambitions. All of it offered freely in the first wave of connection. And they do this because it feels like intimacy, because vulnerability has been sold to them as the currency of real connection. And they are not entirely wrong. Vulnerability is essential to deep, authentic relationship. But there is a crucial distinction between strategic vulnerability, which creates depth and reflexive disclosure, which creates familiarity that obliterates desire. The man who tells you everything about himself in the first week becomes a known quantity in the second. And known quantities, however pleasant, do not create longing. Mystery is not the pretense of depth. It is the actual possession of it. It is having an inner world rich enough, complex enough, developed enough, that even you haven't fully explored it yet. It is the ongoing project of self-discovery. The books you are reading, the ideas you are wrestling with, the experiences you are pursuing, the questions you are sitting with, that make you a person who cannot be quickly categorized. The second practical application is the discipline of selective revelation. Not lying, not performing. Selective revelation. The conscious choice of what you share, when, and in what context. The practice of pausing before you speak and asking yourself, does sharing this serve the depth of connection I'm building, or does it simply satisfy my need to be understood? The need to be understood. To have your full story known, your full context grasped, your full complexity appreciated, is a deeply human need. But it is also a trap, because the moment someone believes they fully understand you, the mystery that creates desire begins to dissolve. Machiavelli's lesson, speak less than you know, reveal less than you feel. And when you do speak, when you do reveal, let it land like a gift. Something offered with intention, something that deepens the story rather than completes it. The man of mystery is not the man who says nothing. He is the man who, when he speaks, makes you want to hear more. Principle 3. The indifference of the sovereign. This is the third principle, the most counterintuitive, the most difficult, the most powerful, and the one Machiavelli most explicitly warned about misuse. Sovereign indifference is not coldness. It is not cruelty. It is not the calculated performance of not caring in order to make someone care more. Those are the counterfeits, the surface-level imitations that men with shallow understanding attempt and ultimately destroy themselves with. True sovereign indifference is something else entirely. It is the genuine, embodied, lived reality of a man whose self-worth does not rise and fall with the responses of others, whose mood is not determined by whether she texted back, whose confidence is not contingent on her approval, whose value, in his own perception, does not change based on whether any particular person chooses to see it. This man, this genuinely indifferent sovereign, is the most attractive person in any room he enters, not because he performs not caring, but because he actually doesn't need to be chosen to feel chosen. He already knows what he is. He already lives in relationship to his own value. And this internal relationship, this settled, unshakable sense of self, radiates as a field that others can feel without being able to explain why. Women describe this quality in 1,000 ways. They say he had something. They say there was an energy about him. They say he didn't seem to need anything from anyone. They say being around him felt different, more alive somehow, more real, like existing in his presence was a sharper version of existing. What they are describing is sovereign indifference, the presence of a man who is entirely at home in himself. Machiavelli put it this way: the prince who needs the approval of his subjects is not yet a prince. He is a subject who happens to wear a crown. You have been wearing a crown and behaving like a subject, seeking approval from the very people you want to attract, making your desirability dependent on their assessment of you, letting her silence unsettle you, letting her attention inflate you, letting the cycle of her availability determine the quality of your day. This is the chain. This is the fundamental inversion of power that has been keeping you in a position of perpetual seeking. The third practical application is the construction of an unshakable internal reference point. This is the most demanding of the three principles because it cannot be built through behavior alone. It requires genuine inner work. The development of a relationship with yourself that is so solid, so honest, so clear-eyed about your own value and your own limitations, that external validation becomes genuinely unnecessary, not as an act of willpower, but as a natural consequence of being deeply at home in yourself. This means knowing what you value, not what culture told you to value, not what your parents approved of, not what earns social points, what you actually, in your own interior, find meaningful, compelling, worth your finite time on this planet. It means pursuing those things, relentlessly, shamelessly, without waiting for permission or validation. It means building a relationship with solitude that is not loneliness, but richness. The man who cannot be alone with himself is always running from himself, and everyone can see it. But the man who is genuinely at peace in his own company radiates a quality of self-possession that is more attractive than any technique ever invented. It means developing the emotional regulation to observe your own reactions without being controlled by them. To notice the pull of her approval without being dragged by it. To feel the discomfort of uncertainty without letting it collapse your behavior. Sovereign indifference is the most advanced form of self-mastery. It is the crown that, once truly worn, changes everything. When these three principles operate together, the economy of presence, the architecture of mystery, and the indifference of the sovereign, they create something that cannot be manufactured through technique. They create a gravitational field. A man in whom all three are genuinely operational does not chase desire. Desire finds him, not because he has followed a formula, Because he has built something real, a self so genuinely full, so authentically deep, so completely sovereign, that being in its orbit is an experience people seek and remember. This is what Machiavelli was warning about. Not the tricks, the transformation. Because a man who undergoes this transformation cannot pretend he hasn't, cannot go back to performing smallness, cannot unsee what he has seen about the mechanics of power and desire and the fundamental architecture of human attraction. And the woman in his life, whether she is one or many or the one, will feel the difference. Not because he told her about his transformation, because his transformation changed the texture of reality when he entered the room. But the coldest, most precise, most actionable applications of these principles, the specific moves, the specific language, the specific behavioral calibrations, that is what comes next. And it is where the theoretical becomes lived, where philosophy becomes power. The coldest move is still ahead of you. Stay locked in. Theory is a map. But you do not live in maps. You live in terrain. And terrain demands specificity, so let us get specific. By now, you understand the three principles at the level of structure. You understand why they work. The psychology, the mechanics, the Machiavellian logic behind each one. But understanding why is only half of transformation. The other half is knowing exactly what to do when you are standing in front of her. When she's not texting back. When she seems interested one day and cold the next. When you feel the pull to pursue and you don't know whether to hold your position or move. That is where most men fall apart. In the lived moment. In the actual interaction. When the principles they understood in theory are being tested by the chaos of reality. So here is where we make it concrete. Tactic 1. The delayed mirror. The first and most immediately applicable tactic derived from the economy of presence is what I call the delayed mirror. Here is how ordinary men operate. She sends a signal of interest. He reflects it back immediately and at equal or greater intensity. She texts. He texts. She laughs. He laughs louder. She shows warmth. He shows warmth times 3. He becomes, in the language of human interaction, a mirror that reflects whatever she projects. And mirrors, however useful, hold no fascination. You don't wonder about a mirror. You don't think about it when you leave the room. You use it and forget it. The delayed mirror works like this. You match her energy, but on your own timeline and at a fractionally lower intensity. She texts enthusiastically. You respond, genuinely, warmly, but 3 hours later. Not because you are playing a game, but because in those 3 hours you were actually doing something that matters to you. And when you respond, your message is warm, but slightly more reserved than hers. Not cold, simply contained. What this creates, she begins to work, not consciously, but her attention starts moving toward the gap between what she projected and what she received. She begins to wonder, at a level below conscious thought, whether she is in step with you or slightly ahead of you. And the desire to close that gap, to earn the full reflection, generates interest that no amount of immediate mirroring could produce. The key is that your delay must be genuine, not performed. You are not ignoring her. You are genuinely engaged with your own life. And when you do show up, you are present and real. Not cold, not aloof, not punishing. Simply proportionate. Machiavelli wrote, "The prince who gives his subjects exactly what they ask for teaches them to ask for more. The prince who gives slightly less than expected teaches them to appreciate what they receive." Practical implementation. For the first month of any new attraction, aim for response times that slightly exceed hers. Not dramatically, not insultingly, but enough to establish the subtle dynamic that your life does not revolve around her availability. And make sure, this is critical, that when you do respond, your message has substance, has wit, has personality. She should feel every time that waiting was worth it. Tactic 2. The open question. The second tactic applies to conversation itself, to the specific way you speak when you are with her. Most men, in the presence of a woman they are attracted to, do one of two things. They perform or they confess. They either try to impress, launching into stories designed to demonstrate their value, their humor, their adventurousness, their depth, or they over-disclose, sharing their wounds and their fears in a premature bid for intimacy. Both behaviors are driven by the same underlying anxiety, the need to make her like you, to ensure she is sufficiently impressed, to close the gap of uncertainty by giving her enough information to make a favorable judgment. The open question is a different approach entirely. Instead of performing or confessing, you ask. But not ordinary questions, not surface questions designed to keep conversation moving. You ask questions that cannot be answered quickly. Questions that require her to go somewhere inside herself she wasn't expecting to go. Questions that create, in the architecture of your conversation, a sense of depth and genuine curiosity that is almost entirely absent from how men typically speak to women. Consider the difference. Ordinary question, what do you do for work? Open question, is what you do for work something you dreamed about, or something that found you? Ordinary question, did you have a good weekend? Open question, what was the moment in the last week where you felt most like yourself? Ordinary question, what kind of music do you like? Open question, is there a song that, when you hear it, takes you somewhere specific? Somewhere you hadn't thought about in a long time? These questions do several things simultaneously. First, they signal that you are a person of unusual depth, that you are curious about the interior of people, not just the surface. This is rare, and rarity, as you now know, creates value. Second, they shift the dynamic of disclosure. In a typical interaction, the man over-discloses and the woman under-discloses. The open question reverses this. She is now the one revealing, reflecting, sharing. And the person who reveals is the person who invests. And the person who invests is the person who develops attachment. Third, and this is the most Machiavellian layer, they reveal almost nothing about you while creating the impression that a profound conversation has taken place. She walks away, feeling that you truly saw her, truly reached for her, truly made contact with something real inside her. But she knows relatively little about your interior. You remain, even after genuine connection, partially uncharted. And uncharted territory is territory people want to return to. When she turns the questions back to you, and she will, practice answering with stories rather than facts. Facts are information. Stories are experience. And experience creates texture, creates dimension, creates the sense that you are a person who has actually lived something, not just accumulated data. Example of the distinction. She asks, what was the hardest thing you've ever had to do? Fact-based answer. I went through a really difficult breakup and had to start over. Story-based answer. There was a period, maybe 3 years ago, when I had to dismantle a version of myself I had spent years building. Walk away from something that looked successful from the outside but felt hollow on the inside. The hardest part wasn't the loss. It was sitting in the uncertainty of not knowing what I was building toward next. That silence between identities. That's the hardest thing I've ever had to do. The same information, an entirely different experience of receiving it. One is a biographical fact. The other is a window into an interior world of genuine depth and honest self-awareness. That is the open question tactic. Ask in depth, answer in texture, reveal in layers. Tactic 3. The calibrated withdrawal. This is the third and most powerful tactic, and the one most likely to be misunderstood. The calibrated withdrawal is not the silent treatment. It is not punishment. It is not the cold shoulder designed to provoke anxiety. Those are the counterfeits, the desperate, low-level versions of a principle that, properly understood and properly executed, is one of the most elegant tools in the architecture of attraction. The calibrated withdrawal works like this. At a moment of genuine interest, when she is warm, when conversation is flowing, when the connection is building, you pull back. Not dramatically, not cruelly, but deliberately. You create a natural, graceful ending to the interaction before it reaches its natural end. You leave before the room wants you to. Machiavelli understood that the prince who exits at the peak of the celebration is remembered as magnificent. The prince who stays until the room is empty is remembered as ordinary. It is the moment of departure that defines the memory of the arrival. In practice, this looks like this. You are in a great conversation. She is engaged, laughing, leaning in. The dynamic is working. And instead of pressing your advantage, instead of extending the evening, extending the conversation, extracting every possible moment of connection, you pause. And you say with genuine warmth and zero apology, "I've really enjoyed this. I need to get going, but let's continue this soon." And you leave, not coldly, not mysteriously, simply with the sovereign ease of a man whose time has value. A man who does not need to extract every possible moment because he trusts there will be more moments. A man who does not desperately cling to the good feeling because he is at home with himself when the good feeling is absent. What this creates is almost neurologically precise. The conversation was cut off at its peak. The pattern is not complete. Her brain, that pattern completion machine, is now going to do something you could not manufacture any other way. It is going to replay the conversation, extend it in imagination, fill in what might have been said, experience a version of the evening that is better than the evening itself, because imagination is unlimited and memory is generous. And the creator of that experience, the architect of that beautiful, unfinished thing, is you. The calibrated withdrawal must be genuine, it must be warm, and it must be consistent. Not every single interaction needs to end this way. That would become a pattern she could read, and readable patterns lose their effect. But as a recurring feature of how you engage, leaving slightly before she wants you to, ending conversations that are going well before they plateau, it establishes you, in the landscape of her experience, as a person of perpetual interest, because you are always, ever so slightly, more than she has fully seen. Dialogue. Examples. The 3 tactics in real scenarios. Scenario 1. She's been distant for 3 days after a good first date. Common reaction. "Hey, just wanted to check in. Had a great time the other night. Hope everything's okay with you." This signals anxiety. It broadcasts that you have been tracking her silence. It hands her the full power of your attention while she has given you nothing. Strategic reaction. 2 days of your own genuine silence. Then a message that is specific, confident, and slightly irresistible. "I just walked past a bookstore that had a display of Borges quotes in the window. Made me think of something you said about endings. Dinner Thursday?" No anxiety, no checking in, no acknowledgement of the silence, just evidence that you have an interior life, a specific memory of her, and a confident forward motion. Scenario 2. She asks why you haven't texted more often. Common reaction. "I'm sorry, I've just been really busy. I should have made more time." This is an apology for having a life. It concedes the frame that constant availability is the standard against which you should be measured. Strategic reaction. A slight, genuine smile. "I think most interesting things take time to develop. I'm not interested in something that burns out in a week." Are you? No defensiveness, no apology. Simply the repositioning of your rhythm as a feature, not a failure. And a question that redirects her attention from your behavior to the larger question of what kind of connection she actually wants. Scenario 3. She tests you by cancelling plans at the last minute. Common reaction: "Oh, okay, no worries. Maybe next time. Let me know when you're free." This accommodates completely. It communicates that your time has no value and your plans have no weight. Strategic reaction: "No problem, I had something come up anyway. Let me know when you're looking to try again." Said warmly, said without edge. Said by a man who genuinely does have things going on, and genuinely doesn't need this particular evening to work. The difference is not in the words. It is in the reality underneath the words. This is why Machiavelli warned against using these tactics as tricks. Tricks are words without reality, and words without reality collapse under the slightest pressure. The errors that destroy everything. There are 3 errors. They are universal. And they are the ones most men, even men who understand the principles at the conceptual level, make repeatedly. Error 1. Inconsistency of frame. You hold your sovereign position for a week. Then she gives you a cold moment and you panic, flooding her with attention in a desperate bid to re-establish warmth. This is the most destructive error because it doesn't just reset the dynamic. It actively demonstrates that your sovereignty was performance, not reality. Because a man who is genuinely sovereign does not abandon his position because of a cold afternoon. The correction: learn to sit with discomfort. When you feel the pull to chase, to overtext, to check in anxiously, that pull is the test. And the test is not about her, it is about your relationship with your own internal state. Can you feel the discomfort without being controlled by it? That capacity is the essence of sovereign indifference. Error 2. Intellectual signaling instead of genuine depth. You hear the principle of mystery and decide to say cryptic, pseudo-profound things in order to seem deep. This is one of the most transparent and embarrassing moves a man can make. Genuine depth is specific and grounded. It is the man who says something precise and surprising about something real. Performed depth is vague and theatrical. It is the man who says things designed to sound meaningful without actually meaning anything. If you do not have genuine depth, if your interior world has not been genuinely developed through reading, experience, reflection, and honest self-examination, then no conversational technique will create it. The only correction is the actual development of interior richness. Read books that challenge your thinking. Have experiences that disrupt your comfort. Sit with questions you cannot easily answer. Think about things longer than feels comfortable. Over time, this develops genuine depth. And genuine depth does not need to signal itself. It simply is. Error 3. Using these principles against people who don't deserve the distance. This is the one Machiavelli most gravely warned about. These principles, when stripped of their philosophical foundation and reduced to manipulation tactics, can be used to create false attraction in people who are genuinely interested in connection. That is not power. That is cowardice, wearing the mask of strategy. And the man who builds his love life on manipulation does not end up with desire. He ends up alone, surrounded by the wreckage of relationships he poisoned. The purpose of everything in this video is not to win a game. It is to become so genuinely valuable, so actually full, so deeply developed, so authentically sovereign, that when connection does happen, it is real, built on something that can hold weight. The man who applies these principles correctly does not end up with a woman he tricked. He ends up with a woman who chose him knowing who he is. And that specific, rare, genuine kind of being chosen is the only version worth having. By this point in your understanding, something has shifted. You are not the same person who started this video. Not because the video is magical, because you have absorbed something that cannot be unabsorbed. A framework that will now run in the background of every interaction, every moment of uncertainty, every time you feel the pull to shrink or chase or perform. And the transformation is not complete. The final stage, the one that locks everything in, that makes all of this not just understood but lived, is what comes next. This is the closing of the circle. This is where the man who started watching becomes someone else entirely. Stay with me. The last transformation is the deepest one. By the time you reach this moment, something is different. Not in the world, in you. You can feel it even if you can't name it yet. A subtle but irreversible shift in orientation. A turning of the inner compass. The beginning of a realignment between who you have been and who you are now capable of becoming. This is the transformation that Machiavelli was actually describing. Not the man who manipulates, the man who has seen the mechanics of power so clearly, so honestly, so completely, that he can never again pretend he doesn't understand how this works. And with that understanding comes a responsibility. Not to others, though that matters too, but to yourself. The responsibility to actually become what you now understand it is possible to become. Because knowing and not becoming is its own particular kind of suffering. The worst kind, the kind that comes from having seen the door and choosing to stay in the room. You are leaving the room today. The man you were, let us be honest about him. Not cruel, honest. The man you were before this video believed that desire was something that happened to you. Something granted or withheld by external forces. By her mood, by luck, by whether you said the right things, whether you were impressive enough, funny enough, successful enough, physically attractive enough. That man spent enormous energy managing other people's perceptions, crafting versions of himself for different audiences, performing confidence he didn't feel, suppressing needs he was ashamed of, showing up to interactions already braced for rejection, already calibrating his behavior to maximize approval. That man gave his attention away freely because he didn't believe his attention was worth anything. That man was available for everyone because being unavailable felt like arrogance he hadn't earned. That man disclosed everything because he needed to be understood completely, immediately, desperately, because he wasn't certain he could survive being partially known and still chosen. That man was running from himself toward the temporary relief of someone else's approval. And here is the most honest thing I can say about him. He was doing the best he knew how to do, with the framework he had been given, in the culture that had shaped him, against the backdrop of everything he had been told about what it meant to be a good man, a vulnerable man, a man worth loving. He was not weak. He was uninformed, and uninformed is curable. The man you are becoming, this man, the one forming now in this moment as you integrate what you have absorbed, is not his opposite. He is not cold where the other was warm. He is not closed where the other was open. He is not cruel where the other was kind. He is deeper, more solid, more real. He is warm, genuinely warm, but from a position of fullness rather than need. His warmth is a gift he gives, not a currency he trades for approval. He is open, genuinely open, but selectively. He reveals what is real and what matters in the right moment, to the right person, in the right depth. His openness creates genuine intimacy rather than bleeding vulnerability that creates discomfort. He is kind, genuinely kind, but not at the expense of his own boundaries, his own time, his own truth. His kindness is the kindness of a man who respects himself enough to respect others without diminishing himself in the process. He has presence, not the performance of presence, the real thing, the quality of being completely in the room, not distracted by her perception of him, not running calculations about whether he is making the right impression, not managing his image, simply present, which is, paradoxically, the rarest and most attractive quality a human being can possess. He has an economy of presence because his life is genuinely full. He has architecture of mystery because his interior world is genuinely developed. He has sovereign indifference because his self-worth is genuinely his own. He doesn't chase because he is too busy building. He doesn't beg because he has too much to offer. He doesn't need to seduce because his life already does it for him. The paradox Machiavelli left us here is the final truth, the one that completes the circle. Machiavelli warned, remember, never to use these tricks carelessly. And now you understand why. Not because they are dangerous to others, because they are a mirror. When you begin to apply these principles, the economy of presence, the architecture of mystery, the indifference of the sovereign, you will discover something unexpected, something that changes the entire frame of what this video has been about. You will discover that the woman you thought you were developing these principles to attract is, in some sense, irrelevant. Not because she doesn't matter, but because the man these principles are building is a man who no longer needs a specific outcome with a specific person to feel complete. He is a man who has developed such a rich, full, sovereign relationship with himself that attraction becomes a natural feature of his environment rather than the desperate project of his identity. And this is the paradox. The man who least needs to seduce is the man who sedates without trying. The man who is most genuinely indifferent to outcome is the man who creates the most intense desire. The man who is most fully himself, most completely present to his own life, his own values, his own becoming, is the man who creates the most irresistible gravity. Machiavelli understood this about power, that the prince who most desperately needed the throne was the least qualified to hold it, that the leader most anxious about loyalty was the one who inspired the least. That power, real power, had a paradoxical relationship with the need for it. Those who needed it most had it least, and those who had it most needed it least. Desire operates by the same paradox. The man who needs to be desired is the least desirable. The man who is genuinely self-contained, genuinely sovereign, genuinely at home in himself, that man is desired by a quality of attention that no technique could manufacture. So the final lesson, the one that all three principles were always pointing toward, is not about women. It is about you, about the project of your own becoming, about the construction of a self so genuinely full, so actually developed, so completely real, that desire becomes a side effect of existence, rather than the exhausting, desperate project of your days. Machiavelli's warning was not about protecting women from your tactics. It was about protecting you from the illusion that tactics are the answer. The answer is the man, always, only the man. Consolidation. What you now carry three principles. Let them settle. The economy of presence. Your attention is valuable because your life is full. Not because you withhold it strategically, but because you genuinely have competing priorities that matter to you. Build a life that pulls at you. Make yourself, in the most real possible sense, someone whose time means something. The architecture of mystery. Your depth is real because your interior world is developed. You have read, thought, experienced, questioned, reflected, and you continue to do so without end. You reveal in layers, not floods. You answer in texture, not facts. You leave every conversation with something still uncharted. The sovereign indifference. Your self-worth is yours. Genuinely, completely, independently yours. It does not rise when she approves and fall when she withdraws. It is a fixed point from which you observe the variable weather of other people's responses with genuine curiosity, but without existential consequence. These three together create a man who cannot be easily forgotten, who leaves impressions that last, who moves through the world with the unhurried gravity of someone who knows, at the deepest possible level, who he is and what he is building. This is the man you are becoming, not tomorrow. Not when you have done enough work. Not when you have earned it. Now, in this moment. With the understanding you have just absorbed. You begin the construction now, and you never fully stop, because the construction of a sovereign self is the work of a lifetime. And it is the most rewarding, most dignified, most alive way to spend your time on this earth. The final realization. Here is the last thing I want to leave with you. Attraction is not the point. It never was. Attraction is a symptom of something deeper. A sign that a man is living in genuine alignment with who he is and who he is becoming. A natural consequence of a life being built with intention, integrity, and sovereign self-direction. The man who chases attraction misses the point entirely. He spends his energy on the symptom while ignoring the cause, and he wonders why, even when he succeeds, even when the tactics work and the attraction is created, it feels hollow, empty, not like the real thing. Because it isn't. It's a copy of the real thing, created by performance rather than substance. The real thing, the attraction that is deep and genuine and self-sustaining, is a consequence of the real man. And the real man is not built by tactics. He is built by choices, by commitments, by the willingness to do the difficult, daily, unglamorous work of becoming someone worth wanting. Machiavelli knew this. He spent his life studying power and concluded what all serious students of power eventually conclude, that the greatest power is the power over the self, that the man who commands himself commands his world. That sovereignty begins not in the throne room, but in the interior, in the quiet, decided, unshakable relationship a man has with his own values, his own direction, his own becoming. You now know this. Go build it. If this message reached something in you, if something in these words landed on a truth you already knew but hadn't yet named, then comment below with this phrase: I am the sovereign. I am the scarcity. I am the silence. This is not just a comment. It is a declaration, a public acknowledgement that you have chosen, consciously, deliberately, to step into a different relationship with yourself, to stop chasing approval and start building worth, to stop performing power and start possessing it. This is a silent pact among the men who understand. Comment it. Let others who are on the same path find their people. And if you subscribe to this channel, understand what you are subscribing to. Not entertainment, not content, a commitment. A recurring conversation between a man who refuses to stay small and a voice that refuses to let him forget what he is capable of. You are not clicking a button. You are joining a fortress. A space built for men who are serious about the interior work, the real work, the work that no one sees but that changes everything. The fortress is here. It has always been here. And it is built for exactly the kind of man you are becoming. Go now. Go and let your silence be your answer, your presence be your power, and your becoming be your legacy. Machiavelli built his philosophy in the shadow of collapse, watching kingdoms fall, power shift, men rise and crumble. And his conclusion, stripped of everything else, was this: the man who knows himself cannot be taken from himself. Know yourself. Build yourself. Be undeniable. The world will feel the difference.